Hi, everyone. Welcome to My Weight Live. Registered dietitian Nada Abualoon is joining us today to talk about how much protein we should be eating, foods we think are healthy that really aren't, how to avoid nighttime snacking, and more. Before we get started, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and let us know if it's your first time joining us. Nada, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me, Ansley.
So, I'd like to start out talking about protein. Why is getting enough protein so important when we're trying to lose weight?
So, when we lose weight, we naturally lose both fat mass and muscle mass from our body. And so, getting enough protein is so important to help us maintain our muscle mass and prevent us from losing it. And so, that is so critical for strength. Muscle is what holds our bones in place. It contributes to our resting metabolic rate. And so, it's so important that we're preserving it as we're losing weight. Another really important reason is because protein actually promotes satiety. So it helps keep us full for a longer period of time. And that becomes really critical, especially when we're trying to sustain a calorie deficit.
So, Dr. Michael Lyon one time said to me that people tend to reserve all of their protein for their evening meal and not think about eating it consistently throughout the day. Is that also something you observe?
Absolutely. I do see that very commonly in my practice.
So, how do we figure out how much protein we should be eating each day?
So, using a calculation, ideally, if you're looking to lose weight on a calorie deficit, I would suggest eating 1 gram to 1.1 gram per kilogram of body weight worth of protein every single day. Or another way to calculate it is getting 30% of your total calorie intake from protein.
Oh, that's great. So, for a 150-pound woman, for example, what would that translate to into grams of protein?
So, if we're doing 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, so that would yield approximately 75 grams of protein a day.
So, what are some easy ways to add more protein into our day?
So, just being mindful of having protein rich foods with every meal and snack, including breakfast. So, for example, if you typically have cereal or baked goods in the morning, swapping those out for more protein rich options such as Greek yogurt or eggs. I also find keeping protein rich snacks conveniently and readily available around your household or your work environment can be an easy way to get that protein in and pack it in throughout the day.
So, what are some of your favorite high protein snacks that you love to enjoy yourself?
Hard boiled eggs are one of my favorites, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese with some fruit. I also like roasted beans and chickpeas. Those tend to be one of my go tos as well.
I love those too. So, why is a high protein breakfast particularly beneficial? Like, what did the studies show?
Yeah, so starting your morning off with something that's more protein rich actually helps keep you full for a longer period of time. So it takes a lot longer for protein to digest than it does with carbohydrates or simple carbohydrates like cereal, for example. And so it just helps keep you full for a longer period of time. It also helps with better and more sustained energy levels throughout the morning and afternoon. And studies actually do show that people who start their morning off with a protein rich meal often eat a lot less ultra processed foods during the day.
We are going to pause here and do our trivia question. Folks, if you answer this question, you'll get our incredible recipe collection of budget friendly meals. These are easy, nutritious meals that you can make at home that are affordable too. And you'll get those recipes for free if you answer our trivia question, which is true or false. 80% of the world's supply of maple syrup comes from Canada. Is that true or false? Is 80% of the world's supply of maple syrup from Canada? Put your best guess in the comments and you will get that recipe collection delivered to your Facebook Messenger inbox. And folks, you can take our My Weight Action Plan questionnaire to receive personalized suggestions to help you reach your best weight, all for free. We'll put the link to that in the comments. Okay, Nada, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about ultra-processed foods. We've been hearing about them a lot in the media these days. What makes ultra-processed foods so challenging health-wise?
Well, ultra processed foods are foods that have gone through a lot of processing. They usually have a lot of added ingredients in them, such as refined sugar, salt, oils, and fats, additives, preservatives. And The way they're manufactured just makes them melt in your mouth, taste really, really good, and it becomes so easy to consume them way beyond need. And there are some studies. The one that comes to mind is the one by Kevin Hall, where they randomized two groups of participants to a processed diet and an unprocessed diet, and they actually found that the group that ate the processed diet ended up eating a lot more calories and gained weight compared to the group that didn't eat the processed diet or ate unprocessed foods. And so other studies have also linked ultra processed food consumption with increased risk of heart disease as well as certain types of cancers.
Nada, what are some examples of ultra processed foods that many of us eat, but we might not realize how unhealthy they are?
Well, many breakfast cereals, granola bars, energy bars, and many packaged foods, which include crackers, chips, baked goods.
So those are the ones we really want to avoid. And I'm glad you called out breakfast cereal specifically because I think sometimes we can think we're eating whole grains or making a really healthy choice, and there can be a lot of calories and sugar in those cereals.
Yes, absolutely.
So there are simple swaps we can make that aren't a huge change, but can definitely boost the quality of the food we're eating. What are some of the healthier alternatives you recommend that our audience try out?
I can show the audience a few items from my pantry, if that would be helpful. So, one of the items that I really like are these crackers called Mary's crackers. And the reason why I like them is because if you turn around and look at the back, unlike other crackers that have mostly refined flour, salt, sugar, and oils, these ones are actually made up of whole grains like quinoa and brown rice. They have a ton of flax seeds in them, and they have 3 grams of fiber per serving. And so I really enjoy those with a hummus dip or some cheese. Another example of a packaged food that I really like is this stone mill bread. And similar to the crackers, this bread does not contain refined flour, sugar, and oil as the first few ingredients. It's a whole grain bread with lots of whole grains and flax seeds as well. And what I really like about it is I get 7 grams of fiber in just the 2 slices, and that's the quarter of my fiber requirement for the day, which is quite neat. And it has a very minimal sugar and trans fats. Another product that I really like, so if you're looking for a salty, crunchy snack, I find that these roasted chickpeas come in handy. And so I really like those because, like the other options as well, if you read the back of the label, they're low in sugar. They have 10 grams of fiber in just half a cup. And that's a really good amount of fiber. And we know that chickpeas are also high in protein. So it's kind of like 2 in 1.
Oh, fantastic. I love those choices, and I'm going to definitely check out that bread. 7 grams of fiber in 2 slices is
Right.
excellent.
Yeah.
So I think the first person I heard talk about health washing was Dr. David Macklin. So tell us, what is health washing and why is it so problematic?
Well, health washing is a marketing technique that's used by food manufacturers where they add labels or claims to their food to make it seem or appear a lot healthier than it actually is. So that can be labels that we see, such as keto or fat free or organic. And the average consumer at the grocery store may be misled by a lot of these labels, especially if they're not turning the package around and looking at the ingredient list or the nutrition facts table. They can make those purchases just solely based on those claims, thinking that those foods are providing nutritional value to their diet when in fact they really aren't.
So as I was going through the grocery store, I was amazed by how many products have the word organic or natural or fresh on the front panel that really does make you think that it's healthier than it is. And so one of the examples I saw that was probably the most blatant example of health washing is vitamin water. It has vitamin in the name, and it does indeed have, vitamin B and zinc and vitamin C added, but you're getting 27 grams of sugar in that drink. And that just seems like a lot to me. What would you want us to know about drinks that have that much sugar in them?
Yeah, well, that's equivalent to eating a couple of slices of cake or several tablespoons of refined sugar in just that drink. And they are oftentimes way overpriced, compared to really the amount of nutrients that we're getting from them.
The other thing that I was struck by, were the number of like fruit snacks in a given aisle clearly directed at kids, and they say like made with real fruit on the front package, but they also have so much sugar in them. What are other products that we should really be aware of or steer clear of?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ansley. I was at the grocery store the other day picking out snacks for my little one, and I did come across those candy gummies that said made with real fruit in big bold writing. And when I turned the package around, the first few ingredients were just different names of sugar. Another example that I came across recently as well was veggie chips. Or vegetable chips. They had different colors of of chips in there. So there was green and orange and yellow, and they actually had pictures of real vegetables on the front of the package. And so when I turned it around and flipped the package around and looked at the nutrition facts table and the ingredient list, they were really not no better than your typical or average potato chips. And what's funny is they didn't have any vegetables at all.
I'm not surprised at all. That's probably food coloring that's turning it those colors that make us think that it's healthier than just like you said, regular potato chips.
Or make us think that we're eating vegetables.
Exactly. So you've alluded to this a few times. You keep talking about flipping that package over and looking at the nutrition facts and looking at the ingredient list. When we do that, what are we looking for?
So, when we turn the package around and look at the ingredient list, it's really important to read the whole ingredient list and make sure that the ingredients in any product that we're buying are ones that are familiar to us or ones that we're able to recognize. And then when you're looking at the nutrition facts table, just looking at the total amount of trans fats, saturated fats, added sugars that go into our products, and making sure we're choosing the ones with minimal amounts of those while maximizing the amount of fiber that's found in the foods that we're choosing.
When we're looking at the ingredient list, are we trying to look for something that has as few ingredients as possible or ingredients that we can recognize that don't sound like chemicals?
Exactly. Yeah. So, with the few ingredients as possible, usually those tend to be, you know, maybe better, but sometimes there are ingredient lists that are quite long. And that's just because of maybe they're enriched with vitamins and minerals and whatnot. So maybe going with ingredient lists that have familiar ingredients that don't sound like chemicals is a great idea.
Nada, when we're trying to manage our weight or eat healthier, many of us have this kind of all or nothing mindset. Either we're going to do it perfectly or we're not going to do it at all. Is this something that you see in the people that you work with?
So, yes, it is something that I very commonly see in my practice. So, we know that this all or nothing kind of mindset or thinking around food is problematic because managing our weight really is a lifelong journey that requires lifelong interventions. And that's just the reality of it. And having this all or nothing kind of thinking, doesn't really help because when you're all in, you're all in. But then as soon as something happens or you slip or have a setback, then it can be so easy to get discouraged and find yourself on the other end of the spectrum. So I always encourage people to work on living or finding that gray zone or middle ground that actually works for them, that's sustainable, enjoyable, and realistic long term.
So not feeling like we have to be perfect every single day of the week, but figuring out that how we're going to incorporate the occasional treat or how we're going to incorporate the girls' weekend into our lives so that we can enjoy them too.
Right, right. And coming to an agreement with yourself that it'll never be perfect and really accept that, I think is a big part of it as well.
Oh, actually, I'm so glad you said that because I do think even when we are kind of planning a treat, or it is still easy to believe that we can be perfect, like we can do it perfectly. And that's really the most challenging part about it. So really kind of getting comfortable with the fact that we are going to fail.
Absolutely. Yeah. Setbacks are a very natural part of everyone's success. They're inevitable. They will happen. We all have things that come up in life that are unexpected, that throw us off or make us act in a way that is not necessarily in line with the direction that we want to be heading in. And what really determines our success long term is not the fact that we have those setbacks or not, it's just how we respond to them. And so, I really encourage people to practice that self compassion, just being kind to yourself, non judgmental. And that is critical to help you with getting back on track and continue to move forward.
A friend of mine was saying recently that she's just gotten in the habit of finding the win in every day. Like, so even if things really did not go the way she wanted, she didn't get to make as healthy choices she would have liked, she still is focused on saying, did I do the best I could? And trying to find something positive out of the day, which I've been trying to embrace as well. Because I think that's exactly what you're talking about. It's more of a practice being kind to ourselves than, trying to be perfect.
Absolutely.
In case you're just joining us, we're here with registered dietitian Nada Abualoon talking about protein, deceptive food marketing claims, and more. And we're giving away a delicious recipe collection of budget-friendly meals if you answer our trivia question, which is, true or false, 80% of the world's supply of maple syrup is from Canada. Is that true or false? Is 80% of the maple syrup in the world from Canada? Put your best guess in the comments and you will get those recipes delivered to your Facebook Messenger inbox. And folks, we do the show every month and we want to make sure you never miss an episode. Text the word WATCH to 844-966-1957 and we'll send a short text message to you when we go live each month. Okay, Nada, let's talk about fiber. I was just told by my doctor that I need to make sure I'm eating enough fiber. Why is it so important and how can it help us reach a healthier weight?
Well, fiber has actually been linked with a reduced incidence of many chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, as well as certain types of cancer. High fiber has also been proven to be helpful at lowering blood cholesterol levels, and it does help with more sustained weight loss.
Wow, so that's quite a lineup.
Mhm.
About how much should we be trying to get each day? Like what should our goal be?
So, ideally, 25 to 35 grams per day would be a good amount of fiber to aim for.
And if someone is just getting started trying to think about getting more fiber into their day, what's the low-hanging fruit? Like where should they start? What are the easiest ways to get more fiber?
Trying to incorporate or add it gradually to your day is helpful. And then focusing on those high fiber foods, which are often plant foods. So, getting in your servings of fruits and vegetables, trying to consume those with the skin on when possible. Having nuts and seeds throughout the day, those could be really good sources of fiber as well as beans. So, legumes and whole grains are all very good sources of fiber.
So, a lot of times when people are trying to watch how many carbs they're eating, they discount certain foods like beans or like whole grains as being high in carbs. But those foods also have a lot of fiber and nutrients. So, how do you encourage the people you work with to think about the quality of the carbs they're eating?
So, I would encourage people to look at the total amount of nutrients that they're getting from the carbohydrates that they're consuming. So, we know that whole grains are full of B vitamins and are also very high in fiber. And then, when you subtract the total amount of fiber from the total amount of carbohydrates, you'll get the net amount of carbohydrates, which is usually a lot lower than the total amount of carbohydrates. And the reason why we do that is because fiber is a type of carbohydrate that, isn't absorbed into our bloodstream and it just kind of passes out through our stool. And so it's not really counted as a carb.
Okay, I want to do a little commercial here for beans and lentils because I feel like they're such an underutilized food here in North America, but they've got so many nutrients and fiber and protein. Tell us why they are so important to try to start including in our diet.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Ansley, they're full of fiber. They're very, very good sources of fiber. They're protein rich. So they really help keep you full for a longer period of time. They're packed with vitamins. And what I also really like about them is they're so budget friendly. So they tend to cost a lot less compared with other sources of protein. And they're so easy to prepare. Especially if you're going with canned bean options.
So, Nada, many of our viewers have told us that they have a habit of nighttime snacking that they really struggle with. Are there any tips that you'd recommend that can help people avoid snacking in the evening after dinner?
So, this is actually a very common habit that a lot of people run into. So, if you come back home after a long day of work, you're unwinding on your couch, watching TV and snacking, then your brain has really coupled those two behaviors together. And it becomes really difficult for us to break those habits. And so, one change that I do encourage people to do at that time is to maybe try removing themselves away from that priming environment. So instead of sitting on your couch around your living room and watch TV, maybe try to pull yourself and go somewhere else in your house and do something different, like maybe read a book or play an instrument or do some knitting, or maybe even take a tablet device and watch your shows somewhere else in your house that's not so triggering to be snacking. And so as soon as you remove yourself from that environment, it helps with uncoupling those two behaviors in your brain.
Oh, that's a really good suggestion to even kind of watch the show in a different place, in a different environment, just to kind of remove that cue so it's not quite so strong. Do you notice that it gets easier over time? Like, are the first few nights when you're kind of breaking the snacking habit the hardest and then it gets easier as you do it more?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Practice makes perfect. Well, I don't want to say perfect, but progress. So yeah, the more you practice doing it, the easier it will become. I mean, the first few weeks may be really difficult and challenging, but it does get easier with time.
And probably we don't want to start watching a certain show with a snack either. So, kind of like eliminate that cue from the beginning. Maybe start watching TV with a cup of tea as opposed to some chips, for example.
Yeah, then that can be an option too. So using a cup of herbal tea, which is nice, warm, and comforting, it keeps your hands busy. So that can also be a great strategy there.
So, let's talk a little bit about meal planning and meal prep. Do you encourage the people that you work with to meal plan? Is it an important skill to develop?
Yes, it's one of those really essential skills that will determine your success because meal planning in advance is really key, especially if you're busy, right? And you go to work and then you come back home in the evening and you have family duties. If there is nothing ready for you to eat, the last thing you want to think of is your dinner meal or what you're going to eat for dinner, and then it becomes so easy to opt for whatever is convenient, fast, or quick, and oftentimes, those options are not the greatest for your health. And so, if you get into the habit of preparing or planning at least for your meals in advance for the week, it just becomes so much easier for you to execute that plan during your busy work week when you're overwhelmed with so many different things, rather than having to make these executive decisions around every single meal and snack during the week.
So, do you encourage people like at the beginning of the week on Saturday or Sunday to really think about what they want to do for the rest of the week, or should we start smaller than that even?
I mean, it really depends on what works for you. So, if you are able to pull out an hour or two of your weekend to maybe even plan one or two meals in advance, I always like to encourage people to write those meals down, maybe on a whiteboard and stick it on their fridge, just as a reminder. And keeping it simple, right? So, choosing very minimal ingredients, trying not to complicate the process does help as well.
So, what are a couple of meals that you personally like to kind of meal prep and plan ahead when you know you've got a hectic weeknight coming up?
Well, as a busy person who works full time and is a mother, I generally choose meals that use up the least amount of dishes. And so I often like to make one sheet pans. Those are go tos for me. And so in advance on the weekend, I would marinate some chicken or fish or tofu. I would throw in a bunch of vegetables and, maybe some potatoes and sweet potatoes and then stick those in my freezer. So they're just really easy to quickly put in the oven after a long day of work. And I also like one pot dishes as well, where I can just throw all the ingredients in one single pot. So I make a lot of stews or chili, and I find that those last for a really long time too. And so I can guarantee that I almost always have leftovers when I make those things. And then I do find that I tend to make a lot of stir fries too at the end of the week. So if I have marinated chicken or marinated tofu in advance, I would just toss that with some frozen vegetables and make a meal out of that towards the end of the week. And so dishes is the least amount of dishes that I can get, the better.
I'm totally team fewer dishes. I think those are some really great suggestions. And we also do have a collection of recipes for one pot meals. And folks, we will put that link in the comments. Nada, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to cover in terms of misconceptions people have about nutrition or things you wish people knew?
Well, a very common misconception is eating healthy meals or making healthy meals is so time consuming and takes up a lot of time. And I hear that a lot. And the reason why I feel like that's a misconception is because I've tried it myself. And so oftentimes I find people telling me, "Well, oh, I don't have time to make breakfast in the morning," and I just end up at a drive-through to pick up my breakfast on my way to work. But I've actually timed it, and it takes a good 15 to 20 minutes to get breakfast from a coffee shop or fast food chain in the morning with all those long lineups compared to making it at home, which really takes me 3 to 5 minutes. And the same goes for dinner. A lot of people say, well, I don't have time to prepare dinner and end up doing takeout or ordering in. And I've calculated that too. And the amount of time that it takes me to make dinner is usually 20 to 30 minutes, especially if I have my meals planned for or maybe even prepared in advance. Whereas maybe ordering something in or picking something up could take a lot longer than that.
That's a really good point. And I think I'm glad you referenced the planning because I think if we have a plan and we have kind of a collection of recipes that are our go-to recipes when we know it's going to be a hectic night, the sheet pan meals you referenced or a stir fry, it really can be kind of not much of a trade-off to just go ahead and make something at home when you know you've got the ingredients and you know what you're going to do.
Absolutely.
Nada, what is the number one thing you wish people knew about weight management?
So it is a lifelong journey. There are no quick fixes, and that diets don't work. And I would invite the viewers today or anybody struggling with their weight to consider thinking about adherence to a lifestyle long term that they are able to actually sustain and enjoy.
Nada, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really practical, helpful conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
And a big thank you to everyone watching at home. We so appreciate you being here and chatting with us in the comments. Before we go, here's the answer to tonight's trivia question. True or false, 80% of the world's supply of maple syrup is from Canada? The answer is true. If you didn't get to answer the trivia question, but you'd still like those budget-friendly recipes, just leave a comment for us and tell us what you thought of tonight's show. We will be back to you with a new episode in a few weeks. Until then, please stay safe and take good care. Good night.